The storm arrived so violently that night that it sounded like the whole world was trying to break down my front door. Rain hammered against the windows, thunder shook the walls, and every few seconds lightning turned my empty living room white. Then someone knocked. When I opened the door, I froze. Standing there soaked from head to toe was the one person I never expected to see again, my ex-girlfriend's sister, Emily. She looked exhausted, frightened, and completely alone. Before I could ask what had happened, she gave me a nervous smile and said she had nowhere else to go. I stepped aside and told her, "Stay here, the storm's too bad." She looked past me toward the living room couch and quietly replied, "Only if I'm not taking the couch." For the first time in months, I almost smiled. Before that night, I had spent nearly a year trying to rebuild a life that had fallen apart. My relationship with Sarah had ended badly, not because we stopped caring, but because we stopped knowing how to forgive each other. There had been misunderstandings, family pressure, arguments that grew into silence, and finally one terrible evening when she packed a suitcase and walked out. I never saw her again after that. What hurt almost as much was losing her younger sister, Emily, who had always treated me like family. She used to call me whenever she needed advice, bring me coffee when I was working late, and joke that I was the only person who understood her terrible taste in movies. After Sarah left, Emily disappeared too. I assumed she had chosen her sister's side. I never blamed her for it, but the silence still hurt. If stories about second chances, unexpected kindness, and people finding their way back to each other mean something to you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the beginning of a completely different life. That night, I handed Emily a towel and watched her shiver beside the heater. She explained that she had been driving home when the storm flooded the main road. Her phone had nearly died, her car had stalled, and the hotel she tried had lost power. She had called several people, but nobody answered. Then, almost reluctantly, she remembered my number. She said she had stared at it for 10 minutes before finally pressing call. I wanted to ask why she hadn't contacted Sarah, but I knew there were questions that could wound more than they could heal. Instead, I made tea and found an old sweatshirt she could wear. When I returned, she was standing in the hallway looking at a framed photograph of Sarah and me that I had never found the courage to throw away. Emily noticed me looking at it and said she was surprised I still had it. I told her I hadn't kept it because I wanted Sarah back. I kept it because throwing away every memory of someone didn't make the pain disappear. Sometimes you simply learn to carry the memories differently. Emily lowered her eyes and admitted that Sarah had asked about me many times. That sentence hit me harder than the thunder outside. We stayed awake for hours while the storm raged around us. Emily finally told me what had really happened after the breakup. Sarah hadn't left because she stopped loving me. She had believed I would eventually resent her because of problems in her family. At the same time, Sarah had misunderstood something I had said during our final argument and thought I wanted freedom from the relationship. Neither of us had known how badly the other was hurting. Pride had filled the silence between us until silence became a wall. But there was more. Emily confessed that she had been struggling too. She had lost her job months earlier and had been quietly dealing with financial problems while pretending everything was fine. She hadn't stayed away because she hated me. She stayed away because she felt guilty for being caught between two people she loved. That night, sitting across from me with a warm cup between her hands, she finally stopped pretending she was okay. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the damage was everywhere. Fallen branches covered the street, power lines were down, and several houses nearby had flooded. Emily's car was still stuck several blocks away. I helped her get it towed, then drove her to her apartment. When we arrived, she discovered that water had entered through a broken window and ruined most of her belongings. She stood in the doorway staring at the mess, and I watched the strength leave her face. I didn't know what else to do, so I started cleaning. For hours, we carried soaked boxes outside, wiped furniture, moved ruined books, and tried to save whatever could be saved. Neighbors eventually joined us. Someone brought food. Someone else brought blankets. Emily kept apologizing for being a burden, and every time she did, I reminded her that needing help didn't make her weak. By sunset, she finally smiled. Then she asked me the question I had been avoiding since the night before, whether I would ever forgive Sarah. I told her forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. I could forgive Sarah without pretending the past never happened. I could forgive myself too, for every harsh word, every assumption, and every moment when I had chosen pride over honesty. Emily nodded, wiped her eyes, and said there was something she hadn't told me. Sarah was coming back to town. My heart stopped. For months, I had imagined seeing Sarah again. But now that possibility was standing in front of me, and I realized I wasn't afraid of her rejection. I was afraid that maybe we had both changed too much. 3 days later, there was another knock at my door. Sarah stood there. She looked different. Not dramatically, but enough to show that life had changed her. She didn't ask to come inside. She simply stood on the porch and apologized. She apologized for leaving without listening. She apologized for believing the worst about me. And then she said something I had waited a year to hear: she had never stopped loving me. I didn't immediately take her back. Instead, we talked. For hours. We talked about everything we should have talked about before. Fear. Family. Money. Trust. Expectations. The loneliness we had both hidden behind anger. There were tears, uncomfortable silences, and moments when neither of us knew what to say. But for the first time, we weren't running away from the difficult parts. Months later, Emily found a new job and rebuilt her apartment. Sarah and I slowly began seeing each other again, not as the people we had been, but as two people who had learned something from losing each other. We took things slowly. No promises we couldn't keep. No pretending everything was perfect. One evening, Emily visited us and laughed about that terrible storm. She looked at me and said she still remembered my invitation that night. "Stay here, the storm's too bad." Then she grinned and added, "And I still wasn't taking the couch." We all laughed. And somehow, that little joke became the memory that reminded me how strange life can be. Sometimes a storm doesn't come to destroy your life. Sometimes it forces people to stop running long enough to find each other again. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. Before you leave, comment, "I believe in second chances," if you believe that some broken relationships can still become beautiful when people choose honesty, forgiveness, and kindness. Because sometimes the person who arrives at your door during the worst storm of your life isn't there to take something from you. Sometimes they're there to remind you that you were never meant to face every storm alone.